Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how to turn this very simple sketch of a river running through some mountains and having some trees sort of cut in and out the landscape. So very rough sketch. This took me about 5 minutes to pencil everything in, and this essentially just forms a very rough guide to the actual painting. A lot of the detail you want to try to put in with the paintbrush, obviously because it is a painting, so make sure you just get in enough details to indicate the main features. Now, what I'm going to do first is go straight into the sky area, and basically what I'll do is pick up a bit of cerulean blue. I'm going to use a 1-inch flat brush, and this is just going to allow me to get in that section a lot faster. So cerulean blue, just mixing up a new batch of it here. It's come straight from the tube as I've run out a bit earlier, and got a nice little puddle of it here, and just testing it out in the sky. Okay, that looks a little bit dark, a little bit too dark, so I'm going to water this down just a tad so that it's around just a little bit darker, a little bit lighter I mean. So just get it all in like this, and just add more water if you feel that it needs to be lighter, which I do. You want to make sure, especially in this sort of daytime scene that I have here, you just want to make sure that there's a lot of light in the sky, and you do that by just making the sky the lightest part of the painting. So coming further down here, and I'm really just going to add some clean water. I might add a bit of this kind of grey down colour with a bit of red, just a teeny bit of red in there, and just water this down a fair bit. And I'm going to drop a little bit of this in at the bottom here, and carry this wash all the way down. I want it to be pretty light, and what I'll do is actually add in some clouds, just some small clouds running through that section. I think that's going to help make the sky look more interesting, give a bit of variety to the painting. So most of that's all pretty much done, and remember this is going to dry a lot lighter. So using this same flat brush, a synthetic flat brush, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pick up a little bit of red in there and add in maybe a bit of yellow, a tiny bit of yellow as well. I'm just trying to get a greyish colour, a warm grey colour, and I'm going to add in just some indications, some clouds in here. That. Yeah. Just reaching across the sky, and more further up as well too. Trying to make it quite varied as well. I don't want it to all look the same. Actually, around the top, it's important to make the clouds a little bit darker as well. But just a little bit is fine, because I don't want it to look like I guess a stormy sky or anything like that. So just keep that under the wraps, and make sure you don't go overboard. What I'm going to do as well is while this paint is still wet, you can add in little bits of some darker areas in the clouds like that, using a little round brush now, just on the bottom areas of the clouds. I find that helps to give it a bit more dimension. That, and little clouds maybe across here. That bit's already dried up, but no problem. sometimes having a mix of some wet in wet clouds and some sharper looking clouds just keeps things interesting. Okay, so don't want to overdo it, just making sure I'm getting in a few of those clouds. And you know, another thing I like to do as well is maybe lift out a bit of this paint near the top of the clouds. So just getting a bit of a tissue here and doing this sort of thing in some areas of the clouds, sort of near the top. And that's just, again, going to help to make them look a bit more realistic. That. And again, don't spend all day trying to do this, just a little bit here and there should do the trick. Okay, so the sky's practically done. Now what I'm going to do is try to get in some of the light on these mountains here. There's actually some mountains in the background which I'm going to indicate in just a light blue, and hopefully maybe just a wet on wet as well in some areas. And for the rest of it, it's all going to be pretty much green, yellows, bit of kind of brownish tones in there, and through here it's just going to be blue, so that cerulean blue, maybe a bit of green in here. So idea is that you've got the sun cutting across this large mountain to the left, casting a shadow here, but illuminating this side and some of the trees as well. Okay, so I'm going to get straight into it, and using a smaller flat brush now, I'm using this is a 3/4 flat brush. I'm going to just re-wet some of these areas in the back here where the mountains are. So just these smaller looking mountains there, like that. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I can now add in a little bit of this cobalt blue, and just want to make sure that it is a bit darker than the background color, so the sky color. So just adding that in like this, it's just an indication of some mountains in the background. Okay, so nothing too difficult there. Okay, later I might add some softer ones in the background, who knows. We'll just go with this for the time being. And at the front here, it starts going into this greenish kind of yellow. So I'm picking up a light green. This is actually green yellow from 𝗤𝗟𝗏, but you can pick up, like any kind of sap green plus a bit of yellow. That's going to work. And what I'm doing here is I'm just allowing some blending to occur. So just letting these mountains kind of mix in a little bit with the green, and just keeps things interesting. I'm going to get some yellow as well to put through. This is just a bit of cadmium yellow. You can use some yellow ochre as well. That's going to help. So really what I'm trying to do is just get in the background kind of color here, so of these mountains, and I want that to be fairly light before I go in with some of the darker areas. So let's go ahead and get that done. Carry that wash down. Don't forget the left side as well. This is again a combination of yellow ochre and a bit of light green. Okay, so I'm gonna now just get in this mountain to the left, just the underlying color. like that, and just like this, let it do its thing. Carry this wash further down. Just want to also keep this side alive, so I'm adding a bit of water into this mix here because I don't want it to dry off before I'm finished with the left hand side. So trick is just adding a little bit of water in there, and if you've got the page on a slight slant like I do, it actually travels downwards and leaves a bead at the bottom. So little trick that I learned, like that, just to give you more time to get the other side done. So you can't rush this as well. You have to let the paint settle in to the paper and, you know, allow you some time to add in some wet on wet effects. And what I'll do as well, I want to get in this little river down the center. And again, I'm using some cerulean blue and getting it to go all the way up to around here, like that. Let it blend a little bit, but I'm just trying to get in just a decent amount of blue in here. It's slightly darker than the sky as well, so make sure that you imply that. There's actually some cobalt blue in here which helps, and just going around, you know, you can leave some lighter spots in there too if you want. And you know, as we go down to the front, it actually gets pretty light around this area. So a lot of interesting things going on here, and then it gets a bit darker around here, like that. So just want to add a bit of variation in there. And the trick is essentially to do this at the same time that you're doing these kind of lighter colored mountains in here, because you want it to blend a little bit into the green. So, but at the same time, you know, needs to be enough of a distinction between those areas. So, you know, I'm going to actually add in a little tiny bit of red, and this is actually a bit of sepia, just a tiny little bit in here, just to change things up a bit, like that. And I'll do it to this side as well, and maybe a bit more of this yellow, and then a tiny bit more of this here. Okay, and picking up some sap green now, I'm going to very carefully start going into the area near the water. So you can leave some bits of white there, that's fine, but for the most part, if you let the blue sort of settle in for a while, you can then start going in, and the green will not completely mix in. You just get bit of bleeding onto the edges, and that's what you want. You want it to do this and look nice and seamless. It's something that you can't really paint yourself. You've got to let the watercolors do it. This area is actually very light. I'm going to just lighten this up a bit here, especially in this area near the front, and bit of yellow running through here like that, and let's carry this all the way down to the bottom, and want to actually add a tiny bit of blue through this mix as well, like that, because there is a large shadow being cast. I'm going to grab a bit of this cobalt blue and try to just get in some darker spots like this. might be a bit dark. Well, actually, it should be fine. It will dry off lighter. And going up to the top of the mountain as well, you know, just adding in a few quick strokes like that. Yeah. And, you know, maybe just running across the hills in the back too, and over here, just implying some shadows like that. And what I'm going to do as well, usually keep a little pocket knife, or if you've got a plastic card or something, to go through and just lift and scratch out a few blades of grass and trees and things like that. It's not quite ready for that yet, so I'll leave that and go further down here. And you know, this is a kind of a funny spiral pattern, so I'm trying to cut around some areas of it. And this is now just going to be darkened a bit here, and really all through the front it's just trees. So just getting in a little bit of this darker color and a bit of sap green as well to mix in with the blue. And later what I'm going to do is just add some more details to that mix, but we want to just loose style underpainting, so darkening it up more as I come into the foreground, and a bit of cobalt blue as well in there. Let's work on this side a bit more. I'm always just trying to change up this color a little, keep things looking interesting. Like that. A bit of blue further down, and we'll make it green again here. That. All the way down to the foreground we have here. And yeah, I want to keep some of these lighter shades of green so that the trees that we then paint in afterwards, they have a decent range of different tones running through them. So just trying to get this in fairly quick like that. Okay, so that's the main sort of first layer done. And you know, another thing I like to do, because the painting is still wet, pick up a fan brush, and what I'll do here is just get some of this blue, bit of this cobalt blue, and mix it with some of that green. And you know, here you can just start to indicate some of the trees already. And you know, this is just a few little brush strokes, but you can get in indications of little trees, and don't have to sit around all day to draw them individually. And it's really enough to do this. So just going in and indicating, and if you do this as well in the wet areas, you get these lovely looking soft sort of trees. So it's a great advantage wet on wet. But you know, you get areas that will be already dried or slightly damp, that kind of thing. So don't worry too much if you can't change those areas up, add in trees to those areas. And another thing is that the trees also, as you can see what I'm doing here, it indicates the little undulations of topography. So they're kind of going upwards, trying to just indicate and suggest that this is a larger kind of mountain. It's going up. And over on this side as well, we want to do the same thing. It's still fairly wet in that area, so just leave that for a bit. You can even use a rigger like this, and oops, remember to dry it off first, otherwise you get these blooms running through it. Don't want any excess water going through, and things like this. Just get in a few larger trees running through, and I'm hoping, just to get some wet on wet through here as well, like that. And as the trees, as you come near the front, you just want to make these trees a little bit more detailed and larger. So as you can see here, like that, this is really going to help with the sense of perspective in your painting. And again, don't worry too much if you have areas that are already dried and some areas which are wet, because all this is going to do is just add some natural variety to your brush strokes. And watercolors, you don't have that, I guess, that sense of consistency with everything, because it dries. Even if you've got good watercolor paper, it dries inconsistently in some areas, and you've just got to learn to work with it. And it's quite beautiful, actually, some of the effects that can come out. You're just not able to paint it yourself, even if you tried. So that's one of the things I've learned to accept and be thankful of. Okay, so some bigger trees here in the foreground as well, and just indicating some like that, maybe with a bit of this cobalt blue, a bit more cobalt blue mixed in there, but just a tiny bit like that. Maybe let's add in some browns in here as well. This is a bit of raw umber here. Yep, just a little bit of detail. Okay, now this left side's probably dried off now. We're starting to dry off. There's still some water in there. Unfortunately, I've gone in a little bit too late, so it's hard for me to lift off some of that paint. But this is the sort of effect that you want, just tiny little areas like this in here, where you can get some varied kind of marks on the paper, and in effect really have some different tones, because the paint that you scratch off here just reveals the layer underneath, which is quite light. So something I always like doing in these sort of paintings. So got a little bit of that going on. Like I said, I've gone into it probably a bit too late, but if you've got a few in there, it does make a difference. Okay, now going back into the left-hand side of the painting now, I'm going to make these trees darker. So I've got a bit of this sap green here, and I've mixed it around with some of this brown, and now I'm just going to drop just little indications of trees, similar to what we did on that side. Let them melt into the paper like this. Little bit of blue in there as well, and near the top as well of this mountain, I just want to indicate some trees just growing off the top like that. Taking a bit of care with that too, and going further down, let's leave a bit of that lighter area on the rock might indicate some light, like this. So really just little trees in the distance that you can barely make out. And a lot of this stuff running down the side is just bits of rock. So what I can do now also is to get some different brush strokes in there. I'm going to be using this little round brush, and as you can see, the shape of the round brush as you tap it onto the paper gives a different sort of look to some of these trees, so that you don't have the same brush strokes. As the fan brush is a really good trick, I guess, to help you get in a fair bit of detail, but you can't have the whole painting with that same sort of brush stroke. So going through, and I'm doing the same thing here, especially around near the water, just trying to get a few little bits and pieces. This is also serves to mark out the boundary of where the river is and where the trees and things begin. So little sort of sharper looking areas like that. There's actually a little bridge running across here. Let me just quickly indicate that like that. I don't want to make that too obvious as well. And let's continue over on this side here. There's actually a shadow that just runs across the entire thing, and I'll actually go in and glaze over the top of that afterwards. And for the time being, just work on getting a bit of texture running through the side of this mountain, maybe a bit of this color, a bit of the brown in here as well. That, a bit of the blue, a bit of cerulean blue, like that. So I want to make this side kind of rough looking, running through the trees, and having a good variation of tones as well. So leaving some of that previous layer behind, that's going to help. Okay. Continue working on this bottom area, and this is where we can start, I guess, getting in some of these larger tree shapes and things like that, same as what we did on the right hand side. And let's just try one there and one going up that. But I'm not going to put all of it in just yet, because I want to wait right to the end where we have some completely dried areas. And over here what I'm doing is just trying to indicate some little leaves and things running around. So a bit of brushwork here, some details in the branches, and having a combination of some of these more detailed areas and looser areas, it just makes your painting look more interesting. So, and it also draws attention to this section too. And again, you don't need to follow the reference picture exactly in these sort of instances. Once you get used to drawing branches, you can really start making it up as you go. So just a bit of detail, tiny bit of detail here. I need to just darken that down slightly. I need to be darker near the front, like this, just to indicate that they are in the front. Joining them up a bit, not going too far as well into the actual scene itself. So just some little marks like that. Yeah. Okay. Back to the flat brush, and going to add in some green and a few little bits and pieces, a bit of blue in here. And what I'm going to do is actually try to scratch out some highlights for some of these branches running through here. And as you can see here, I'm also leaving areas of the previous wash too. I think that's just going to help keep things looking more interesting as well. A bit more darkness there. Yeah. Okay. Let's give this a try. May not be ready just yet. We'll have to wait. This sort of effect is what we're looking for. Just a little bit of this color showing through from the previous wash. It's almost like this a bush in the foreground. It's running through. Keep these little strands running in a few different directions as well. It makes it look a lot more organic this way. There's actually a tree that runs up there, a larger tree that runs up here. We'll get that all in wet on dry in a moment. Okay, I'm going to give this a quick dry off. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to actually glaze over the top of some of this to get in a bit of a shadow running through here and maybe just some areas here. And then we'll start putting in the darks in the front and finishing off the painting. So I'm actually going to use this sort of blue color that I've mixed up here. It's almost like a bluish green color. And getting it to around a mid-tone, so not too dark, but around the strength that's going to cover this area and make it look as like a shadow. So I'm actually going to use a larger flat brush because this is going to help me to not fiddle around too much and really just get it all in one go. So here goes nothing. There we go. Bit of the side here running through that, and there we go. Just leaving some of this color here, there, and running that all down into the water here, that, there, and carrying this across around here, like that. There we go. This area like that, just a bit more obvious. The shadow, maybe a little one running across the back here, like that. And some areas here, perhaps. That here as well. Just keeping it simple. Okay. Now, time for a little bit of this darkness near the front. So just grabbing myself a bit of this sap green now and adding it in to areas near the front. I'm going to swap with smaller flat brush. This is going to help just preserve that shape a bit better. And I'm going to just add in a few darker spots like this and indicate with the round brush in a moment. But near the corners, I just want to get that darker color in, like that. Here, darken that area. Near the front, don't have to color it all in. Maybe a bit of brown there too. And we can start actually doing a bit of negative painting work here as well. So a bit of this running through like that. So we're going to leave this kind of a bit lighter in areas and work with the rest of it. Just getting trees coming in from different angles. Like that. And remember, these are some mountains in the background here as well. I'm going to just dry brush some of that on like that. Also, might just indicate some little reflections in the water from the trees, something like that. Just a dry brush indication like that. Something quite simple. You might even want to have a few little ripples running across the water, but yeah, just don't overdo it. A little bit's fine. You want to preserve that nice blue color of the river running through that. Okay, oops, was a bit much there. And time to bring out the round brush. This is where I'm going to get in the darkest of darks. So I've got sepia and I've got some cobalt blue. This has created a pretty dark sort of color, and I'm going to use that to get in this tree here. And dry off the page slightly first, okay, and bring this all the way up to the top of the page. It goes out into the sky around here, and little kind of branches just coming off as well. Hold the brush right at the end to do some of these. It's going to help make them look a lot more looser and easier to do, rather than you sort of sitting and try to fiddle through everything, because the aim isn't to get these looking exact, and a lot of the time when you try to do that, you get the opposite sort of effect in watercolor. So this is just the final step, and adding in these really dark tones at the end actually bring the painting completely together, because you've got the full range of tones, and the painting looks a lot more interesting. So a lot of people, especially when I started out, I struggled with this last bit because I kept thinking, oh, it's too dark, I'm going to ruin it. But once the painting's finished and you look at it, it's completely fine. It looks a lot better with everything together. So just some little indications like this, and like I said, you've got some of this lighter area here down the bottom, so I might just dry brush some of this like that, indication where it sort of fades in, and I also think I need some trees coming in on an angle to keep things interesting. So let's get some branches coming in from the side like that. And another one kind of running up here. That. There. That. And pretty quick. Like that. And have a look at it. Take a step back. Always look at the painting from a distance and see if it's making sense, or whether you think you should add some more detail in some areas. Okay, let's start working on this side, and we'll get in one of the trees running up here. Like that. Indications of some branches there. Oops. Bigger tree actually runs up to the top of the page here, so really quite dark. Let's mix up some more of this. Don't be afraid to get more of this dark paint on at this stage. This is the kind of finishing touches that you need. Bring everything together. Let's have another one come in. Add some more blue in here, just a little bit more blue. And running up there. Okay, we'll get some smaller branches, some smaller sort of trees all coming up as well. And I'm also trying to just follow this kind of natural undulation of the mountains as well, just to indicate that, you know, it is getting higher as you move to the right hand side as well. And it's getting a little indication of some branches like that running across the scene. Yeah. Some dry brush marks like that. And start working on this area here. So just a few more trees, and I've got some crooked and just some of them are completely straight, and start indicating some of these branches that run off the sides of them as well. Like that. Yeah. Okay. And what I want to do is also just indicate some darker areas here and near the river. Like that. It's a bit too dark in this corner. Let me just dry off lighter anyhow. There. Just looking for areas that you might want to add some more details in, that kind of thing. With this sort of layering, you just get some really nice sort of effects, but you can only see them and interpret it as a full painting once it's finished and all the layers are in. And that's why a lot of people, including myself, when I started, I would be almost wanting to give up halfway through the painting because I felt it didn't really look like anything. But the thing with watercolors is that you must persist and continue on. That's the only way. So just getting some branches running through. Almost done now. And through this bottom area, just getting some quick brush strokes running through here. That. I do feel there needs to be something just sort of coming across like this area, just a little branch or a few little branches. That. They're all going in one direction, so just changing things up. Okay, this is almost finished now. I will just get in a little bit of variation in the water here, just some little waves, indication of some waves running through, ripples, whatever you want to call them. You can't really tell, but overall it just adds just that tiny bit of detail in there. When all together, it just, you look at it from a distance, it all comes together. So just like to do these little things. Get them a bit darker up the front, and they kind of just blend in with the trees and shrubs, that kind of thing. Yeah. And some birds. Just mixing up a bit of darker paint, and let's go in, put a few in. Few larger ones up the top, perhaps. Middle ones here. Sort of running through the mountains too. I think that's important. Helps to break up the sky, add a bit of interest. Gives it a sense of scale too. Okay. And what I'll do, I might just finish off with a touch of gouache. So I've got some white gouache here, mixing that with a bit of the green, the sap green, and seeing if I can just get in some little variations running through the scene, like that. Just little bits and pieces. Some little highlights. The tree there. Little indications of leaves or that kind of thing as well. Okay, and that's finished. Check out these tutorials down the side here. I've got a couple of playlists that will help you get some ideas and improve your watercolors.